Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight to gather together as one to raise your hearts and your voices for Dallas's first International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. This may be our first, but sadly, I am certain it will not be our last. I would like to extend a special thank you to Daniel for organizing this event and bringing us all together. As we stand here tonight at the memorial of John F. Kennedy, I would like to leave you tonight with a few of his remarks that unfortunately he wasn't able to deliver to you himself. In the remarks prepared for President Kennedy for his address to the Dallas Citizens Council, which was to have been held at the Trade Mart the afternoon of his assassination, he was to have said, "There will always be dissident voices heard in the land, expressing opposition without alternatives, finding fault but never favor, perceiving gloom on every side and seeking influence without responsibility. Those voices are inevitable." Yes, those voices are inevitable, but we here in Dallas tonight are going to love them anyway. When we hear those voices, let us not succumb to our own stereotypes, as they so often do. But let us try to get beyond our first impressions, or our judgment of their faults, to try and see the good in them, and try and find common ground. Let us love them even though we may not approve of their actions or they ours, for we truly do not know one another. Let us strive to get to know one another better in spite of our fears and our faults, to see what is positive in each of us, rather than dwelling on the negative. We all have fears or phobias. They exist both inside and outside of our community. Take a moment now to think about something that makes you uncomfortable. Now think about why. For a long time, I held an internalized homophobia. Perhaps it was my upbringing in the church. Perhaps it was a fear growing up as a transsexual girl, and due to social stigma, feeling I had the wrong parts to be attracted to boys. It could have been any number of social factors. At the root of it was a lack of understanding, or knowing better. As with my internalized fears, so too do others have internalized fears of me as a transsexual woman. I recognize now what I did not recognize then. Until we are able to educate others, until they are able to truly know us, until we are able as a human race to simply love one another unconditionally, these fears will continue to lead to oppression and hatred. Transphobia can be looked at as a fear of people who are perceived as not meeting society's expectations around gender roles, identities, and presentations. The majority of information people have had up until the recent past primarily centered around stereotypes and assumptions. To most people, trans people are the freaks from Jerry Springer. Gender too often is confused with sexual orientation. However, trans people, like non-trans people, can be straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, etc. Our sexual preference is not tied to our gender. What are some of the statements, that we as trans folk find transphobic? That person doesn't really look like a man or a woman. What is your real name? I mean the one you were given at birth. What are you really? Have you had surgery? If not, then you're not really a whatever. Why would you transition if you were going to be lesbian or gay? Calling someone an it or he, she is demeaning and does not validate their identity or respect them as a person. Tranny may be a term that some people in the trans community use to reclaim for themselves, and some find it extremely offensive. It should never be used offhand as a demeaning joke or without consent. Using the wrong pronouns or making assumptions about others' gender identities, or offering information about a trans person without their permission, outing someone, is also offensive. Making assumptions regarding hormones and surgery, but failing to recognize that not all trans people are able to afford those options, or for other reasons choose not to go that route. I would like all of you here tonight to be good allies to the trans community. There is much more to transphobia than I could ever hope to convey to you in this short time. So I have prepared some information for you that comes from UC Davis's LGBT program on ways that you too can be a good trans ally. I encourage you to read over these points when you have time. If you're inclined, maybe you could even make a few copies for me and give them to your friends so that they too can have a better understanding of who we, as the trans community, really are. In closing, I would like to leave you with one more thought that President Kennedy was never able to deliver personally. Later that evening, the president was to address the Texas Democratic State Committee at the Municipal Auditorium in Austin. These were the very last lines of the speech that he would have given that night. I hope you will use them as some of the first thoughts of your tomorrows. So let us not be petty when our cause is so great. Let us not quarrel amongst ourselves when our nation's future is at stake. Let us stand together with renewed confidence in our cause, united in our heritage of the past and our hopes for the future, and determined that this land that we love shall lead all mankind into new frontiers of peace and abundance. Thank you.